former Ohio State Democratic Senator and senior fellow at the Institution on Race, Power, and Political Economy at the New School, Nina Turner, and Republican strategist Alex Zdan, two of my favorites. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Republicans divided on how the Trump administration is handling the Epstein files. There's a new poll I want to share with our viewers. Came out this week. It shows 40% of Republican voters approve of what they are doing, while 36% disapprove. There's not a huge, discrepancy here. Misty, we just heard from her, says that the grand jury testimony is a bit of a smokescreen. Alex, I'll start with you. Will this be enough to quiet the storm brewing in the MAGA world, quiet the skeptics out there?
Well, the media's favorite sport is to try and foment trouble in MAGA world and make it seem that there is some sort of split going on. I don't think it's going to be successful. I do think that releasing any credible information about the Epstein case is the right move. Pam Bondi going to the court and asking for that grand jury transcript to be released, even if it's heavily redacted, even if it takes some time, it will help quell some of these doubts about the way the government handled the Epstein investigation and handled some reports of his death, because stuff that's presented to the grand jury is not always stuff that makes it into the final indictment. So there could very well be valuable information inside those grand jury transcripts. Releasing them would be the right move.
And I do agree with you. I think this is the type of story that usually unifies the MAGA base. Nina, your thoughts, and how should Democrats be leveraging this right now?
I mean, I don't think Democrats should be leveraging this for partisan reasons. This is political. The public does have a right to know. We need to not only protect the victims, but care whether or not young girls or even younger women were taken advantage of, the accusations of pedophilia. And the grand jury, the indictment and the grand jury records is primarily about Epstein and Maxwell. What we do not know, and I agree with Congressman Rokana on this, is what other powerful men, and in some cases if there were any women involved, we know there's only one woman in prison right now. None of the other men or suspects have been identified or brought to justice. And so that should be a larger concern. So I don't want anybody using this for just purely partisan reasons. People should care about this for moral reasons. Now, I know that might sound strange, but that's what this should be. I don't like the fact that people are playing sports with other people's lives. It is immoral. And it really says a lot about the callous nature of American culture right now if this is all about I gotcha. But MAGA world is upset, and other people should be upset about this too. Ultimately, we should care more about the victims than we care about partisan politics.
I want to ask Alex about AG Pam Bondi. We've heard she's been, there's some opinions that she was thrown under the bus. She's the one who said, I have the list, I have it on my desk, or I have the paperwork. I shouldn't say the list. What do you think about her? How does this affect her? Is this going to hurt her or help her?
In politics, in business, in life, there's always a simple rule that I try to follow and that people have taught me. Don't promise what you can't deliver.
True.
If you say you have the client list on your desk, you darn well better have the client list on your desk. So I think that Bondi is responding to the furor over that. I think releasing the grand jury transcripts or making a move to release the grand jury transcripts is the right move, but don't overpromise and underdeliver in life.
There's so much to talk about. Nina, I'm going to ask you the next question, if we can answer it quickly, because I want to ask you about the Wall Street Journal lawsuit as well. Trump and other Republicans are calling out Democrats for not doing this themselves when they held power. Your thoughts on that? If the Democrats are open to releasing the files now, why didn't they do it when they were in office, when they had the opportunity?
More than one thing can be true. Absolutely, the Democrats should have done it, and those who are protesting now should have been on the heels of President Biden, no doubt about that. But that fact does not absolve President Donald J. Trump, who out of his own mouth during interviews while he was running again, said that he would release the files. So he can't get away, squirm his way out of this just because he wants to point the finger at President Joseph R. Biden. President Biden is not in office right now, so you can make that fact. But President Donald J. Trump has an obligation to adhere to a campaign promise and, more importantly, to protect the girls and women that him and his party say they care so much about.
Let's go to that recent lawsuit. Thank you for that, Nina. The president suing the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch and Dow Jones over an article that details a friendship between Epstein and Trump. Trump denies the details in that article. He says, I never wrote that letter. That's not how I talk. And there was a picture of a naked woman. He's like, I don't draw pictures. Alex, talk about whether him suing the Journal and Rupert Murdoch could backfire within the base, since Murdoch, and this is important to mention, he controls the Journal, he controls Fox News and most conservative media brands.
Well, if Rupert Murdoch had his way, Ron DeSantis would be president of the United States right now.
Yep.
And so I think that what you're saying is true, and that the alliance between Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump that we saw put on display in 2024 for the election may have been temporary, and Rupert Murdoch may have decided to end it. We don't know that for sure. I'll say this. I don't never heard Donald Trump say the phrase enigmas never age. I don't quite know what it means. It doesn't sound like him. And if those reporters did not make every effort to verify the veracity of this document, they're going to be in trouble.
You know, while all of this is happening on the Republican side, there are opportunities here, and I think you make a good point. This shouldn't be a gotcha moment, but nothing is really taking hold for Democrats. Talk about the challenges they're facing now overall.
But nothing is taking hold for them because they don't have a North Star. They bounce all over the place. You need a poster to tell you what to do. Ultimately, Democrats should be answering to the material conditions of the American people. That's what they should have done when they had control of the Congress. That's what they should be doing right now, instead of playing in our face and playing games. Tricks are for kids. To Alex's point, the enigma word, I never heard the president use such a big word, so he's probably right. The president doesn't talk like that. But he is a president, before he became president, who was on tape talking about grabbing women's private parts. Now, he does talk like that. But Hannah, the Democrats need to get a clue. They can't really continue to point the finger at President Trump. Meanwhile, there are credible allegations against former Governor Cuomo. So people are sick and tired of the hypocrisy. Both parties owe the American people better than what they are receiving right now from either party.
Guys, I really enjoyed this panel. I was looking forward to talking to both of you. Thank you for coming on. Alex, Zdan, Nina Turner, always a pleasure. Thank you.